This session will be moderated by Wes Wasson. You just heard him on the earlier panel. Wes has 20 years experience building and growing successful technology companies. Prior to co-founding DreamStar Labs, he served as a senior executive and board member at several large public tech companies and fast-growing startups. You just heard Wes talking about DreamStar Labs in our prior panel. Wes is a frequent industry speaker and was voted top executive leader in Silicon Valley by the San Francisco Bay Area News Group. He also led an award-winning microfinance institution in West Africa where he helped hundreds of entrepreneurs access affordable loans to start small businesses. And I've personally worked with Wes during TiEcon 2017 Social Impact. Wes helped shape the vision for the track. Please join me in welcoming Wes back to the stage.
Good morning, afternoon, evening. My name is Wes, and I'm the CEO of DreamStar Labs, and very pleased to welcome everybody to this panel on corporate social impact and really addressing the question of can profit and purpose coexist? So for those of you who have been following the sessions today, so far we've looked at the roles of impact investing and purpose-driven companies that are created specifically to solve key social challenges. And for this next session, we want to shift our focus to more traditional commercial companies where, frankly, probably most of us live every day, and really look at these questions of, is it possible for profit and purpose to coexist? Is that just a pipe dream, or is that really viable? And if so, how do we do it successfully, and kind of what works and what doesn't? So now I believe this is a topic of profound importance and unique importance today. The problems we're all facing societally are obviously big and complex. I don't believe they can be solved entirely by governments and NGOs and sort of just letting that sector take it on. We also have a new generation of employees and customers and stakeholders who frankly care far more about corporate social responsibility and these issues than many previous generations. So I think this is a topic that we as a society really have to get right. So we have a great panel of experts who I believe are at the cutting edge of corporate social impact, who are here today to talk about their experiences, stories, and maybe share a bit of advice with you. We have Anand Narasimhan from Microsoft, Anne Fertitta from AMD. Anna Walker is joining us from Levi Strauss Company. We have Sundar Kamuth from Sanmina, who, if you're not familiar with, is a $7 billion Fortune 500 electronics manufacturing company. And very pleased to also have Hannah Noakes from Magnify Impact, who is an author and consultant who works with companies of all sizes to help them build their corporate social impact strategies. So I think for keen observers in the audience today, you will note that we do have panelists named Anne, Anna, Hannah, and Anand. So I think my biggest job as a moderator here is simply to enunciate clearly on the call. So what I'd like to do is actually start off with two questions that we'll address to each of the panelists, and you can use those as a way to kind of introduce what you're doing. So first, I want to start off on the positive side. The reason we're here today is because I think all of us believe that this challenge is actually possible. So I'd love to have each of you start off with sharing one of the things you're most proud of that your company is doing in corporate social impact. So pick something that you've done that's been successful, and this is your chance to brag a little bit. So just very quickly, maybe Anand, everybody knows Microsoft and some of the commercial things you do. Maybe I'll kick it off to you first.
Sure, thanks, Wes, and nice to meet everybody. There are a lot of things I'm proud of, but I think firstly I should talk about sustainability because it's a space that we work in. I'm very proud of Microsoft's leadership in establishing sustainability targets and very ambitious targets to get to carbon negative in the next 10 years. And it's also been a model for others to articulate a strategy that focuses on the impact at the intersection of society and ecosystems. So that's something I'm very pleased with. I'm also really proud of our team. We've done a lot in the last few years to advance our impact on cloud sustainability primarily, but also looking at how it enables not just Microsoft, but also partners, customers, and communities to be more sustainable.
All right, great. And so Anna, you we're at a tech conference here largely, but I think everybody knows the Levi's brand. Maybe you could talk about that from the Levi Strauss perspective and answer the same question. What are you most proud of in some of the work you've been doing there?
Yeah, thanks, Wes, and I'm happy to join the panel today and interested to hear the conversation. Yes, definitely low tech. We make and sell pants. We have been doing so for about 178 years, so very low tech. But what I'm most proud of, and there's many things that Levi's has done in the corporate social responsibility and sustainability space that I'm proud of and across our long history. But I'll speak to that later. But I think the thing right now I'm most proud of is that right before the pandemic, in January of 2020, we initiated a paid family leave policy in the United States for our employees, not knowing the pandemic was coming a few months later. And that was, particularly a safety net that was needed to support employees in this past year, but we're going to have the policy for years to come. And, being here headquartered in the United States with many of our employees here, it's one of the only industrialized countries without a paid family with policy. And so, really to have the foresight to have done that. But what I'm proud of on the social impact space is not only did we do this for our employees, but we've become advocates for a national federal paid leave policy. And we're advocating, our CEO just did an op-ed a few weeks back, and we're joining the advocacy in Washington to build the business case and explain to Congress. And so the impact that we're having is beyond our employee base and really looking to bring this policy to the United States.
That's awesome. And Anne, maybe talk about AMD and pick something that you're proud of there. So maybe on mute. Sorry.
Thank you. I thought I had turned that off. AMD is a semiconductor semiconductor design company, and we've been in business 50 years now. I'm very proud of that long history of technology that AMD has been involved in for many, many years. On the corporate social responsibility front, one of the things that I am most proud of is the fact that social responsibility has always been a part of the company's DNA. It wasn't something that was brought in as an afterthought because of a tragedy or something that happened at the company. We've had a very long history of supporting our communities. Philanthropy has always been part of our legacy as a company. At least 40 of the 50 years we've been in business, we have always contributed to our communities, no matter what. Even in lean times, we didn't stop supporting our communities with our employees and with philanthropy dollars. And so that is something that I am incredibly proud of, is that corporate responsibility has not ever been an afterthought. It's always been part of what the company has stood for.
Yeah, super important. Thank you. And Sundar, I think you're one of the few companies with Sanmina who you go to their website as a Fortune 500 company, and corporate social responsibility is right up there with the other, top 4 or 5 things you're doing in product. But maybe if you could just pick one item for us that you think is inspiring in the work you've done over your years there.
Sure, Wes, thank you. Yeah, Sanmina is a Silicon Valley founded company. We are in 22 countries, 37,000 employees, and we manufacture products, 7 billion in sales. And the company was started in San Jose back in 1980 by the current chairman, Yuri Sola, and his friend. Both were Croatian immigrants who came to the Valley. Now, the CSR project that I want to highlight here is what we call as the Ideal Village Project. And this project is focused on enabling underserved and rural communities with essential needs of clean water, healthcare, education, energy, livelihoods. People may not realize, especially those who are not in the field of CSR, that more than half the world does not have access to one or more of these basic needs. And then you look at how much technology we've developed over the years, how much innovation has happened. So the question that we asked was, how do we take this technology innovation and help these communities that don't have those basic needs? And so the project was launched 5 years ago. That was the motivation. And it turns out there are three important things for success. One is collaboration, because there's lots of NGOs and companies working in these different areas. Collaboration is very important. Second thing is the solutions have to be holistic. You can't treat water without looking at healthcare. They all work together. And the third thing is sustainability. We can't take urban development models and apply them to the rural areas, because we'll create the same mess that we have in the urban areas. So these are the three important pillars. And for collaboration, we have an annual conference at Stanford every June where we bring all these organizations together, and including startups, corporates, and so on. And this has become a very effective forum for organizations to work together, share information, and this is something I'll talk about a little bit later on as well.
All right, awesome. So Hannah, you have a kind of unique role here in that you get an opportunity to see lots of our companies who are at various stages of success and starting things or trying to make them better. So maybe you just do the same thing. It could be either something that you've seen in your practice or maybe an example from a client.
Yeah, thank you, Wes. Happy to be on this panel today. And yes, so while my background is working primarily in large corporations, a couple of years ago, I co-founded Magnify Impact as a way to bring the same opportunities, same level of sophistication around CSR to slightly smaller companies. We primarily work with mid-size organizations. And we are very proud of all the companies that we work with when we see them transform, when purpose becomes the North Star for the business. And they get really focused on how to use their unique skills, products, expertise, and resources to make a measurable difference in the world. A quick example, we worked recently with a large insurance company, and they were very generous philanthropically in the community, but their giving was unfocused. They didn't have any way to measure the impact of what they were accomplishing with those dollars. And by helping them set up focus areas and objectives and define partners that they could work with to reach those objectives, they're now very effective in realizing the value of those investments, both in the community, but also in developing some really critical business relationships. So when we see that kind of thing happen, it makes us very proud.
Yeah, getting that purpose alignment. Yeah. So maybe now let's flip that back over, because I think I've found throughout my career that we all want to celebrate the successes. We often learn and grow far more when you sort of hit that brick wall or you have something that didn't work like you expected. So maybe kind of just change that around, and maybe Anna, we could start off with you. I mean, is there anything you could share with the audience today about something you guys tried that didn't work and kind of lessons learned out of that, just real briefly?
I think you said Anna.
Yes.
One thing when you posed this question before we met, I actually asked my team. I said, how would you answer that? And it was really interesting to sort of solicit the range of things where people reflect on how could we have done it differently and what have we learned. But one that really resonated with me is that we have long had a water strategy at Levi's to address the water use and the production of our apparel. So you may not think of jeans as a particularly water intensive product, but denim today, when you buy it, has been finished. It's gone through some sort of process to give it a different look and feel. And that is a water intensive process. And so years ago, we put together a strategy and a program called Water Less to reduce the water use in the finishing process of denim, and embedded that in our global water strategy. And we're really pushing to apply that to almost all of our products globally and really increase the number. And that's where our attention was focused. And we weren't focused on the context in which the products were being produced. And so we missed in Cape Town, where we actually own a factory in Cape Town, South Africa, that they were reaching what they were calling, day zero, when they were going to be out of water in Cape Town. And we hadn't had our eye on the ball that we needed to not be focusing on the product and the process, but we needed to be focused on the water context. And so really quickly flipped that and started working with NGOs in the area to address the broader context and community, but also having the factory work with the city to put in place facilities so that now now it's operating using 100% recycled water. So we're not contributing to the water shortage in Cape Town. But that was a learning about like looking at the macro and the big strategy and not really focusing on the localized context. And so that was a big learning and mistake that hopefully we will carry forward.
Very cool. So it's when I've only washed my Levi's every other day, then that's fine. I'm actually contributing to the planet, so that's good to know. Maybe now I can switch to Anne, if you could ask the same question for AMD.
Absolutely. So I have a different role than several of you. I focus on corporate philanthropy and the strategy around that. And I would say, when I thought long and hard about this and actually sat and chatted with my boss and, what do we look at when we're looking at failures? And one of the things that I think for us, and this is going to be a little more tactical rather than strategic, although I do have a strategic piece to it as well. We many years ago decided that we needed to plan some sort of a galvanizing event to get our employees jazzed up about going out into the communities and volunteering. And so we came up with this grand notion, it's not an uncommon thing, you'll see it across many corporations, to have a day of service. And we would galvanize all of our employees around a single day. And what we found out was that is almost impossible to do at a global company. And there are multiple holidays in different countries that maybe we didn't particularly think about. There were quarter end close obligations from our finance committees that we did not think about. And it did not go well. And rather than just giving up, we decided, okay, we're going to continue to do this project, but we'll call it a day of service, but it will really last a month to 6 weeks so that all of our sites and more than 20 sites globally participate in this event every year will have an opportunity to get their employees together and do something worthwhile in their communities. And thankfully, that turned everything around. We had record participation and things, we got a lot of praise from employees about the flexibility and being able to do a lot of different things. And as a part of that, we also gave grants to all of those various site communities. And one of the things that I had not been well enough versed in were the challenges of international giving and philanthropy. And if anyone is familiar with trying to donate money in different countries from the US, it can be a bit of a challenge. And so we quickly had to find a couple of different partners who could help facilitate that for us so that we wouldn't violate any of our foundation rules and policies. And I'm thankfully happy to say that we were able to turn that around into a positive.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. And probably got a lot of engagement from employees that you hadn't had before.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. We brought a lot of new employees into that fold of volunteering who had not done it before, but because it was a corporate initiative and not just something, coming from the ground up, it was much more received. We got a lot of praise and a lot of participation.
That's great. So Hannah, maybe on your side, Hannah, you could, this is your opportunity to embarrass one of your clients about what a terrible job they did or one of their failures.
I won't embarrass our clients, but I'll embarrass ourselves a little bit. So I think one of the biggest lessons we've learned over time is while we have a methodology that works, there is no one size fits all solution for various companies that have different histories and cultures and various challenges. And I don't think that we understood that as much in the early days. And through doing hundreds of strategy sessions with companies, we really had to learn the skills of empathy and listening for what is said, but also what's underlying what is said, and how important the relationships between the leadership team are and the perspectives of each individual leader are to bringing everyone into a strategic planning discussion and helping everyone adopt that. So that's something that we've really had to learn. We're about to publish our book, Magnify Your Impact, and that was a real challenge in writing that book. It's a handbook. It's a 4-step blueprint planning process. And how do you teach someone that process while also allowing room for their own unique perspectives and challenges to come through in designing a strategy that that really works. So.
Great. Yeah, and so book plug for anybody in the audience, if this is an area of interest for you, you can look up Hannah at on Magnify Impact. They have a book coming out later this year. Maybe I'll turn to Sundar and talk about just very briefly, one example that maybe didn't go quite so well at Sanmina.
Yeah, actually, I'm not going to point to any failures or mistakes, but what I'd like to say is that this is a learning curve. We are evolving in this whole process, and but what I would like to say is that I think as the tech industry, are not doing enough. Given our innovation, given the technologies and the products that we develop, we can do a lot more in terms of impacting underserved communities and uplifting tens of millions of people who don't have the basic needs. So from that perspective, I think all of us in this industry need to do a lot more. And it's going to pay off economically, because if you can uplift these communities, they'll be the next set of consumers for us, for all the companies. So you have to create the buying power. And the way you create the buying power is by getting them educated, providing them health and all of those. So I think it's a very fundamental point that a lot of us are missing.
Yeah, great. And Anand, Microsoft?
Sure. Microsoft has certainly had its share of failures and mistakes over the years, so that'll take a while to unpack. So I'm not going to do that. But maybe I'll narrow the context to just my work on cloud sustainability over the last few years. When we set our objectives, I naively assume that company has set a target and all the teams will align and we'll get it done. I underestimated the amount of work involved in convincing our various business groups to prioritize sustainability above everything else, or on par with everything else. And that took a while. And it's not just our internal teams, it's also our partners and our suppliers and so on. So I think the lesson for me and for our team was really understanding that we need everyone to be engaged, whether it's employees or business teams or partners or suppliers, and to be able to think deeply enough about sustainability and motivate each other. We're doing that now. I'm sure we'll make plenty of mistakes, but I think we'll learn some good lessons there.
That's great. So we have about 20 minutes left, and so we'll go kind of quickly through this next. But what I'd like to do now is address kind of one question to each of the panelists that really hits on topics I think are broadly applicable. And maybe Hannah, since you have a broad perspective, I'll start with you. Just what's the top advice you give companies when they struggle with this? I think most of our audience today probably fits into that category of early entrepreneurs, mid-sized companies, sort of navigating their way through this. So maybe just real quickly, what's the biggest advice you have?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing I would say is that the impact you want to make in the world is not in conflict with your profitability. When your stakeholders understand the purpose behind your brand, there's a different layer of connection for those stakeholders that's above and beyond the business transaction. And that's where positive word of mouth and loyalty comes from, and real value and profitability for your brand. So that's kind of the number one place I would start.
Great. And maybe the next topic I want to hit on is, what do you do when you face sort of business downturns? And there's very often you fight these perceptions within companies that there's this trade-off between profit and purpose. And when business is tough, it's very easy to turn to the corporate social responsibility budget and slash them. It's not mission critical. We need to survive. So everybody in this panel has gone through that. But Anne, I know at AMD, you had some particular headwinds coming out of the last recession and secular shifts in computing markets and things like that. What was that experience like at AMD, and how did you deal with it from a CSR perspective?
Sure. We went through a major multi-year restructuring, subsequent turnaround, and we're on the upswing of that. If anyone's followed AMD, they probably saw the lows to the highs, and fortunately we're riding the highs now. One of the things I would say is, when we hit that low point around 2012, 2013, there were a lot of hard decisions that had to be made. And so there was a huge restructuring, and that comes with RIFs and also budget cuts. But one of the things that I am most proud of is that we were able to show the business value of volunteering and philanthropy out in the community. We had our own employee engagement data that showed employees who volunteer out in the community are more engaged at work. And when we showed that information to our leadership and showed them that the community support that we had been putting in for many, many years and what the impact of that was, they said, you're right, this is a no-brainer. We will continue doing some level of philanthropy. We'll continue to encourage our employees to get out into the communities, even though, you know, people were sometimes doing 2 and 3 jobs because of different circumstances. And that was when we launched our first day of service, and were able to, while it didn't go as well as we had wanted due to some scheduling conflicts, as we continued to do that program, the numbers grew and grew. We have employees who go out, not just during day of service, but all year round in the communities. And I think it's really important to understand that sometimes taking an hour or 2 away from your day, doing something important in your local community, whatever the need might be, doesn't only help your community, it helps you when you come back to work. You are refreshed, you have a different lens, you're looking at things differently. And leadership recognized that. And our leadership team is out in the community also from time to time. You'll see them at the food bank packing boxes back when we were volunteering in person. Now we've had a big shift where we're doing virtual volunteering, but still our employees have a hunger for it, regardless of the fact that we're not elbow to elbow with our colleagues volunteering in the community. So I would say, even in bad times, CSR definitely has a place in your company. To Hannah's point around purpose and business value, it is there. And it does not cost a lot of money to have a purpose-driven company.
And I love the impact that it can actually create, like forge out of adversity, but actually
yes,
is something that helps the company succeed through hard times, as opposed to being a tax on it. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And it keeps your brand out there as well, which is important, even, you know, because that's not the company that gets talked about most of the time. So kept our brand front and center with our community.
So Anna, maybe I'll address this one to you from the Levi Strauss perspective. But I think one of the common themes, you know, we hear is when we look at corporate social impact programs is, you know, so where does that sense of purpose come from and originate? You know, is it more something where it's grassroots, where you go out and you look at what do our customers and employees already care about? Or is it more likely that starts sort of top down, where a senior leader who, you know, like you see from the Patagonias, the Ben and Jerry's of the world, who kind of lead with a vision and inspire others? And, you know, I think Levi Strauss has this unique, you know, you have this strong founding ethos of your leadership, but also this broad following. So maybe just very briefly share a couple thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you. I love that question. I think we're, as I mentioned, a 168-year-old company founded by Levi Strauss. He was a Bavarian immigrant to the United States and came to California during the gold rush and started Levi's. And from his founding, really brought that Judeo value of being a citizen of the community in which you operate. That ran through, you know, we're still owned by the descendants of Levi Strauss. We only recently went public about 2 years ago. So that founder, you know, and family values have permeated our entire history. But to your question of, is it grassroots or leadership? I think it's both. You know, I can think of many anecdotes in Levi's history where our employees brought forward actions they wanted the company to take, but they wouldn't have happened if there wasn't a leadership there that was purpose and values led, that picked up on it and acted. And so a couple examples are, you know, as I mentioned, we're 168 years old. So unlike other apparel brands, you know, we started with our factories being here in the United States. And in the 80s, those started moving overseas as all apparel production started migrating out of the US and being global in nature. And our employees asked the leadership that as you move this production, what's happening to these workers that used to be our employees and colleagues, and how are we treating this new outsourced production model? How are those people, what are the conditions in which they are working? And that led to our global code of conduct and a careful system of engaging and working with our suppliers to ensure they have high social and environmental standards. In the early 80s, we're a San Francisco headquartered company, a disease started to ravage the community. And our employees came and said, we need to educate on this disease that didn't have a name at the time. It was AIDS. They came to the leadership, and the leadership went out, our CEO at the time, and engaged in the community, and we became leaders and advocates on it ever since. And so those anecdotes of the employees raising a concern and the leadership picking up and acting on it permeates our history. So it's both.
I love that. That's great. Maybe Anon, on the Microsoft side, we've talked mostly so far about stories around what we can do within our own companies. And I think one thing that's always been a question in my mind is like, can that social impact be extended out through a partner ecosystem? And I think Microsoft has been doing some really inspiring work on that front and really kind of leading the charge. So maybe you could just talk about that just very briefly from your perspective and kind of what's working, any quick insights you might have for folks.
Sure. Thanks, Wes. I'll again speak from the lens of sustainability, just to highlight. We've been doing a lot of work with our suppliers over the last few years, and we have suppliers who are varying degrees of motivation, of maturity, and we've been trying to figure out how to get them all engaged, wherever they are on their maturity, of course, and then to jointly establish a roadmap and work towards our shared commitments. A few years ago, we also started to look at how to revitalize circular economy initiatives. So we've got circular centers now across our data center campuses, and that's not just with the view to getting materials and products back into circular loops. It's really also about figuring out how to engage local communities, how to have a voice with local regulations, with guidelines to impact policy decisions. That all work towards shared social impact. So a lot of work going on. We have some strong accomplishments over the last few years, but to be honest, we're just getting started. Lots of opportunities ahead of us.
So now, when you guys approach a partner, with whether it's focused on climate change or things that you're looking at, what's the typical reaction? Do they feel pressured by a vendor, or is it like a positive reception? Like how do you see that?
Interesting. I have to say, most of our partners are actually really willing to engage. A lot of them are quite advanced, to be honest. Some of them are early in their progress, but a lot of willingness. Definitely some challenges, because we have to really understand how to engage them. There might be incentives to bring to the table, or learnings and lessons and so on. But overall, it's actually been very positive.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that, to me, that's a message, I think, for everybody, hopefully on audience in the panel, is just that I think we often underestimate our own ability to create impact when we have that courage to lead, even things that are hard. So we're just coming up at the end of the time here, but Sundar, maybe you can just take a more of a global kind of look at this. You guys have I think 40,000 some employees and around the world, and we've already kind of touched on in the panel. It's really easy to draw something up on a whiteboard in San Jose, and then implementing that broadly. Maybe just any kind of quick 1 or 2 points of advice you'd have for people trying to do similar kind of challenges.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Wes. Yeah, we are in 22 countries, and I think what works best is decentralization. So if I take India as a good example, we have a plant outside Chennai in Kanchipuram district in India. It's on a 100-acre site. It's 350,000 square feet, 2,000 people. And we make products both for export as well as for the new Make in India theme, which is for the domestic market. As part of CSR, what we've done is we've taken up 40 villages around the plant to provide healthcare, health screening, medication, and so on. And then 19 government schools in that same area. And as part of this Ideal Village project, we're working with the local NGOs to implement these ideas. And then we also have some NGOs that are focused on maternal and child health, on providing breakfast programs for children in the morning. That's a key part of cognitive development. And then, I think all of us companies have this opportunity to work around the community in those areas. We do the same thing, or we have different programs, CSR programs in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Hungary, Ireland, Mexico, Canada, and the US, of course. So they support the local communities there. So it's fairly
so setting the priority at a corporate level, but then really letting the innovation come out of it.
For their local needs. Yeah.
Got it. So I appreciate that. So I think we have like 5 minutes left, and I think we'll kind of end this with maybe a lightning round question where we just get a kind of one quick soundbite answer from each of the panelists. And so what I'd like to do is so imagine you've all been doing this or some fashion of this for a number of years, and had some successes and failures and things along the way. If you could go back in time to that first moment when you took on this crazy challenge of trying to bring social impact into your company or into your career, and go back and just you look yourself in the face at that point and give your younger self kind of one piece of advice, what would it be? So maybe Anand, I'll start off with you.
Wow, that's actually a tough one. I would say just to slow down and listen more, honestly.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Hannah?
Along the same lines, it's all about relationships. And that's the way you can make change inside your organization. And by bringing people along and including them as part of the process and building relationships.
Very cool. Anna from Levi's.
Similarly, I would say focus. I mean, there's so much opportunity and so much need out there. And if you're going to really have impact, you're going to have the best impact when you're really focused, where you're strongest and most knowledgeable and have the most to bring to the effort. So don't get distracted by all the need that's out there and really focus where your company and your strengths lie.
Great. Sundar.
I would say start early. I wish I had started 20 years ago in CSI. We can do a lot. Yeah.
Great. And Ann.
Thank you. So I echo Anna. Focus. When I started my career, I was all about trying to boil the ocean, and I learned very quickly that you cannot do that. You really have to have some focus, and it's okay, to focus on the things that you're good at and not try and focus on the things you're not good at.
I love that. I've seen all these kind of things in my own career, and I love the advice there. So we're coming to the end. Maybe I'll just answer, since it's a kind of a challenging question for myself. For those of you who saw the previous panel, I did 20 or so years of my career in companies just like yours, just building great products and things like that, and then sort of shifted. I'm now started a company called Dreamstart Labs that's social impact fintech that's working with underserved, underbanked women in the developing world. And so I've kind of had the chance to see both of those. And I would say, if I had that opportunity to go back, I think I'd probably answer something along the lines of, whatever you're doing, I don't care what kind of company, what your job role is, your title, career stage, just out of college, 30 years in, wake up every day, look in the mirror and say, how am I going to today make a positive impact for people around me? Because it's so easy to get caught up in the logistics of, making something successful, or how do I meet the numbers, or how do I do whatever. But every day you're going to have people you encounter who walk into your office that you didn't expect. You're going to have meetings that you're in, and just be constant thinking, how am I going to make the world a better place? I'm going to, because you can do something in the little, in the small, that builds habits in you that have an impact longer term. And so if you sort of get that discipline early, if I'm 20 years old, I was like, just focus on that. Like, you do that and you're gonna have an impact kind of no matter what direction. So thank you everyone for joining the session today. I hope it was useful to you in thinking through kind of your roles in your company. And I would just encourage everybody who's whatever size and type of company you're in, this is important, right? I think we have not only an opportunity, but an obligation to do more than just be successful and build successful companies, but to make the world around us better. And so I thank you for all the leaders on this panel who are doing that every day. Thanks. Anu?
Thank you, Wes, for a great panel. Thank you, Anand and Hannah, Anna, and Sundar. Great insights. Purpose is something that helps the company and creates more branding for the company. So we hope more and more corporations embrace this and create impact. Thank you very much.